Let's see here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the power of the unscripted self. My name is Susie deVille, and I am the founder and CEO of the Innovation and Creativity Institute. And I help entrepreneurs build exceptional aligned enterprises by tapping into the power of their creativity. And I'm also the author of Buoyant, the entrepreneur's guide to becoming wildly successful, creative, and free. And I have written Buoyant for entrepreneurs and creators who are painfully stuck and riddled with self doubt, who believe the answer is more work, more discipline, and more productivity. And what they may not know is that the easier path is through accessing their inspired, unbridled inspiration. And I am thrilled to pieces to have a dear friend, an incredible mentor, and one of the most soulful, brilliant women on the planet with us today, Gail Larsen. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you.
Let me read her bio, and then Gail is going to kick things off by taking us through one of her signature centering processes. So, Gail is the founder of Real Speaking, which is realspeaking.com, and the award winning author of Transformational Speaking. If you want to change the world, tell a better story. Gail's work has been described by Fast Company as, quote, transforming your relationship to your voice via the deepest stirrings of your soul, unquote. She takes what is often considered our greatest fear, public speaking, and helps us understand that fear is truly excitement without the breath. She delights in each person finding their own, to speak from the truth of who they are and what they love, to open hearts, inspire change, and move people to act. And again, I am so delighted that you're here, Gail. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Susie. And so the practice you mention is many people want to drop a script. Many people want to stand in front of an audience and trust what comes through them. So this is a practice I always use before speaking because it's simple and it reminds us that we can ask for the help we need. So it's as simple as just closing your eyes, going inside, and asking in whatever way you ask, what is the resource that will best support my well-being in this moment? And just allowing it to come. And then once you're clear, placing that resource around you. So in my case, joy before me, joy behind me, joy to the left of me, joy to the right of me, joy above me, joy below me, joy within me, and joy all around me.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I never know what's going to come up. I think if I'd planned it, I'd have said trust, but joy is a very high vibration.
That was
Goes along with buoyant.
yes. Well, what came to me was actually self-trust, which is something we'll be talking about a little bit later today. So it's interesting that that was what came up for me as my resource. But thank you for taking us through that process. I know no better way to introduce people to you in more depth than to share the experience that I had nearly 6 years ago to the day. It was mid-November of 2016 when I joined you in Santa Fe for the Transformational Speaking Immersion experience. And I wrote about it in my book because it was such a powerful, profound experience for me. And it literally soaked into every cell of my body and changed the way that I move in the world, change how I create, changed how I trust myself. So I'd like to take a few minutes. This piece is just about 4 minutes long, and this is the story of my time with Gail in Santa Fe. It's called The Power of the Unscripted Self. I stood in front of my fellow transformational speaking immersion students in a suite in Santa Fe's Las Palomas Hotel and began to tell my story. When I was 3 or so sentences in, Real Speaker founder Gail Larsen looked up from her notes and interrupted me. "You're too cerebral," she said. "Stop thinking and scripting your story. Connect back to your home zone and speak from your heart. Trust the words will come. In other words, get out of your head and into your truth." I started again. I got a bit further into my story before I ran back to the barn of safety by leaning into my brain for language. Gail stopped me again. This time she pointed out where I had made an impromptu action with my journal to illustrate a part of my story and said how much it had resonated with her. "I'm on that beach with you when you drop your journal. Speak from that place." I kept telling myself, get out of your head, but it wasn't easy. I bumbled my way through my story, falling in and out of my need to control a presentation rather than share a deeply felt experience. It was such relief to finally arrive at the end and sit down out of Gail's scrutiny. The part of me I had always relied on, my intellect, was now my biggest stumbling block. No matter how insecure I felt, I always knew I could double down on studying more, pushing my strategic brain to find the right answers, and ace the test. Excel at any task. Now, that part of me was of no use in the battlefield of vulnerability. My power drained and faded, and my overachiever heart sank. Heat rose in my chest, upward to my face and ears. It turned out the woman who aced a public speaking course in college couldn't speak her way out of a paper bag. My mind turned gelatinous with shame. We worked intensely for 4 days, connecting with and dropping deeply into the truest and most vulnerable parts of ourselves. We uncovered what it is about us that is unique. It was an exhausting and profoundly powerful experience. When I boarded my return flight in Albuquerque, I knew something in me had shifted forever and that I possessed the keys to connecting with and moving others through story, whether in speaking or writing. My challenge would be to stay there in that place of trust and surrender, far from the briar patch of my controlling analytical mind. As entrepreneurs and creators, we succeed by connecting with our ideal clients and moving them to action. Whether we are marketing a product, firing up our audience to act, or coaching clients to become the best versions of themselves, absolutely everything rides on how well we connect through story. To do this, you have to learn to get out of your head and into your truth. Our stories and images hold magic. By sharing them within our campfire communities, we can teach and reach and affect change. Your ideal clients can feel when you drop into the core of who you truly are, when you trust your voice. It will take on a cello like, warm, alluring tone when you are there, or sound jagged like permafrost spikes when you are out of sync, dog paddling in currents of control. Going off script and trusting the power of our stories teaches us that surrender connects beyond words and reaches the heart in powerful and indelible ways. So, Miss Gail.
I'd like to say one thing about that
Yes.
that cracked me up. When you said I interrupted you, I've had people in class say, "Don't interrupt me." And I say, "I'm here to coach you."
Well, and it had, see, I was in, let me just describe what happens in your body, and I'm sure people can recognize this experience. When you're so worried about saying it correctly and not trusting yourself,
Mhm.
you get into this very strange locked in place where your head is kind of floating above your body and there's
Mm.
nothing that's connecting into your heart or to your soul. You're just in, am I doing it right mode. So when you interjected slash interrupted slash coached, that brought me back to, kind of woke me up. It was almost like um, a blast of air, right? New oxygen. Oh, right. I'm doing the old thing that I used to do, that I've always done. So without that, then I would have stayed in this sort of headless horseman realm, galloping off to what I thought was safety, which is this cerebral scripted place.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that you did speak up and tell me to get out of my head. So, what I want to start with is I think that's so interesting that I think most people have the same instinct that I have and did back in 2016, which is I don't really trust myself to know the right words. I don't believe that I can connect to story in a way that's resonant and powerful and transformational. So, what is that about? Why don't we trust ourselves?
Well, I don't think we're necessarily taught to. I mean, if we are, that's pretty unusual. And I think when it comes to speaking, scripting and getting it right is just sort of what we're accustomed to. And we think we should do it that way. And the thing I've learned in 20 years of doing this work is because of that, most of us don't even know our best material.
Mm.
You may remember in class, we didn't put a talk together till the end of the third day because in this process of storytelling and finding heart and meaning around something that may not even seem connected to what we think we're there to do, underneath those layers that are so controlled comes the real juice and excitement of the things that we're thinking, well, I can't bring that to an audience. And I learned this the hard way myself. Years ago, I went through a very difficult menopause. And the only way I could manage it was to create this character named Madame Ovary. And I performed doing midlife humor. And I thought, oh my gosh, if people know I'm Madame Ovary, will they ever take me seriously around real speaking? And I realized that the part of me I'd been shutting down, which was the humor and fun that had people really laughing, was the part of me that I was not bringing forward because it felt inappropriate. And Madame Ovary would always remind people, be inappropriate. It's where our life is. And so underneath that controlled, scripted way of showing up, there's life that brings life to everything we do. And that's the journey.
I think that, speaking from my own personal controlling perspective, that I too believe that, if I do XYZ, if I show this certain part of myself, then I'm going to lose the ability to influence people. I'm going to lose my quote unquote authority on the subject. Um, and of course, nothing could be further from the truth. The people who we most want to listen to, the people who we most lean into, who are unforgettable, who are so incredibly articulate and are speaking our own desires and fears and longings so beautifully, do that through irreverence and humor. And they hold us all the way to the end of whatever it is that they're presenting.
Yeah, and what I would say about that, Susie, is if we can, when we're willing to bring our true self forward, and I have an unscripted puppy here, I'll just lift him up so he won't bark again. Um, when we are sitting on that aspect of ourselves that one-on-one really helps build relationship, we are not connecting with the people who are going to love us the most. There's so much around marketing and connecting with our audience. And the truth is, how many people do we need to really have a successful business? But a sustainable business comes from being with the right people, so we find joy and fulfillment with serving them rather than taking down our energetic vibe to try to meet people that really aren't our people. So what I've noticed over time is the more I stand for what matters to me and the more transparent I am, the more I get to work with people who just make my heart sing. And we overwhelm ourselves trying to get it right when we already are wired to get it right with the people we're destined to serve.
Ah, bravo. And, it's interesting the article that Kevin Kelly wrote about 1,000 true fans. That is such a powerful piece. If you folks who are watching, if you haven't seen that piece, do Google that because there is such relief in his beautiful essay, and how our thinking can completely shift to what Gail has just described. We don't need to be looking across the fence to greener, quote unquote, pastures of marketing that don't fit us, don't align with us, that we don't have an interest in, that don't reflect our authentic selves. And we can stay true to who we truly are, which is where all of the magnetized, juicy allure is in our messaging, and have a beautiful small giant business that if we choose to scale later, we absolutely can. But we get to our core, to that first group, by staying true to our core. So, Gail, talk to us a little bit about the concept of the home zone and how you landed on this concept and why it is such a central part of the work that you do.
Yeah, what I noticed is people coming to me because they wanted to be comfortable speaking. So that's what I call the comfort zone. And we need it. It's our credibility, it's our information, it's having the people who invite us to speak know they can trust us to be professional and fulfill the agreement. But it's not the human connection. So the home zone is the human connection. Not, yes, your information is interesting, but boy, I feel you. I'm part of this story that you're telling. And we get to the home zone through story. So story can often be used as another strategy, and we see that everywhere. I won't go into it. But when we speak from our home zone and we are in a story, which is what I invited you, go back to the beach, drop the journal. That's real. I feel you in that. It's how do we relive what happened and feel it all over again so that it's never scripted. Something new will drop in every time. And we use our bodies. It's not here up, I've memorized it. It's like we feel that story as we tell it, and new details will come up. We're present, we're embodied, and then we start telling a story that people relate to because they're in it with us. I think often people say, well, isn't that self-aggrandizing? No, the themes of our story are everybody's themes. There aren't that many different themes in our life, whether it's money or health or spirituality or relationship or, our purpose. People listen to our story not only because it can be entertaining and moving, but because they're looking at their own journey. And if she did it, Maybe there's a hint in there of how I can address a similar issue. So I do think story is the shortest distance between two people because any good story is universal.
Yes, absolutely. And what are your suggestions for folks who are struggling with getting out of this constant attachment to being connected only to our heads and not to our bodies? Are there some suggestions or practices that you recommend that somebody could use before they sit down to maybe write something or create an idea for something to do with their business or before they step onto a stage?
Yeah. I was looking at your background, Susie, and it looks like you have a storyboard up there. So I recommend never scripting, but structuring with sticky notes so things can move around. In my last class, someone rewrote her whole book in preparation for her 20-minute talk the next day. So, structure that allows spontaneity. But in terms of how we show up in full presence, I don't think we should ever speak, get on a stage, move into a significant conversation without feeling our feet.
Mm.
Because if we can feel our feet on the ground, then we start getting in our body. And I say move with what you're saying. Allow your body to move with what you're expressing. And home zone to me is feeling firmly grounded on the earth and also connecting with source in a way that we can trust what comes through us. And we do tend to have limits around how much we're willing to express. So the extreme thing I sometimes recommend to people who are so afraid to express is, if you enjoy a glass of wine or a margarita, get naked, dance what you're going to say. Let your body just get as wild and free as it can. So you have this experience, this embodiment of being bigger with it.
Mm.
You're never going to do that on a stage, but once we free ourselves a little bit, we're more free when we show up in front of others. And as we have fun with it and we see what arises, we learn we can trust it more. And it's actually more trustworthy than what we have planned or scripted or rehearsed. Because no matter how well you do that, it's yesterday's news. We're not present. We're not feeling the energy of the moment. We're not responding to what's in front of us. And it can't ever be that home zone emotional human connection that makes all the difference in speaking and marketing and in life.
I love this. Drink a glass of wine or a margarita, get naked before you do your presentation because number one, it's fun. Number two, it's immediately disarming and it takes us out of this completely constricted space of cerebral only and it puts us into connecting both hemispheres of the brain through movement and of course grounding ourselves and connecting our feet to the energy of the earth. But the other thing that's interesting about that to me is what I think a lot of artists do when they're about to start a new work is that they'll work really, really big on some kind of giant canvas or on a big piece of paper and just get a lot of wild arm and shoulder and wrist movement going and just moving chi all over the place. And then they sit down and perhaps work on something that's a little bit of a smaller scale, a 12 by 12 or something.
Mm.
But all of that energy from that big work now has been channeled and funneled into a smaller piece and it hasn't lost anything. In fact, you've loosened up you're willing to surrender into the energy of what you're feeling now, and you're not thinking about, am I creating something beautiful? You're thinking, what am I feeling and how do I convey that in the moment?
Mhm.
That is so incredibly irresistible to people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember a woman in the class a few years ago who had young children and had a big experience with a cancer diagnosis. And she was afraid of her body and moving it. And so I gave her that advice to go to her room. And the next day she came in and she said, while she was naked, enjoying her margarita and dancing her talk, her husband called. And he said, what are you doing? And she said, well, I've paid a lot for this experience and I'm a coach, so I'm going to take my coaching and this is what I'm doing. And he said, she's a genius. But it was so exciting the next day to see how free she was in her expression. So it's, whatever we're creating or speaking is a work of art, it's an art form.
Yes.
And if we look at it that way and allow ourselves to be bigger than we think we can be, it's really exciting to see how it frees us from the script and
Absolutely.
trust what's there in the moment.
I'm really curious. You've done so much work over the last decade plus on transformational speaking, and I understand you're moving into a new kind of work called transformational listening. And I was curious if you would share just a little bit about that and also tell folks who might be curious about how to explore more about that if they'd like to work with you, how they would do that.
Transformational listening has come to me, I think, over several years. I used to have in my email signature a Rumi quote that said, speak a new language so the world may be a new world. And I started thinking about the languages that speak to us that are beyond words, whether it's dreams or intuition or nature or our bodies, that however we seek wisdom that comes to us and informs our paths. And at a time of division, when our words feel like they've taken us as far as they can go, so many times, and how disheartening it is to see what's become of dialogue, I'm thinking we really need to trust a source of wisdom that can help us write a new story for our world. So it's not totally formed yet. I know I have a lot of research interviews to do,
Mhm.
but it's an experience of listening beyond what the mind tells us to find a new way forward in the world that works for all of life. And so I want to do retreats with clients where we are listening deeply and where we see what emerges. Because most everyone I talk to today is sort of on the edge of something's coming
Yes.
for me and for the collective. And how do I bring form to that? I mean, it's the same thing for me. But I think our old forms are becoming obsolete.
Mhm.
And how can we be part of designing new ways of being that are more inclusive for everyone, where we feel more connected, where we have more compassion even when we don't agree with people? So for me, next year, I'm going to do a listening tour, not a speaking tour, and really see what form this takes. And I'll be doing 2 immersions, so just 12 clients, 6 each. And most people are coming by referral now.
Mhm.
And there's an application process to be sure people have an inner life so they can do the work. But my last class a few weeks ago just made my heart sing. They were aged 30 to 80, 2 men, 4 women. And it was just so exciting to see this little community that was created and how everyone was trusting and speaking to what was emerging rather than trying to get it right to take out in front of an audience. Because in that process, we do get it right for an audience, but it's fresh and alive for us and for them.
Well, and it's so interesting too, just as you had described, this thing that sort of has felt out of reach that we're trying to figure out. This was the perfect description of my entire book writing journey of, just sort of being in this cave of trying to find how all of these pieces fit together and what am I missing and what are the connecting threads. And every single time I tried to force something to happen, nothing happened. Or nothing that was actually worth reading happened. I should clarify that. And then
Mhm.
every time that I got up very, very early, this was something that really helped me. And I'm not suggesting that everybody has to be a morning person because that's absolutely not true. But whatever it is that your what I call your creative circadian rhythm time is, that time of day or could be late night when you are most close to what is your focused, freest access to your creativity. And for me, unfortunately, that turned out to be between about 3 a.m. and about 7 a.m. But what happened was because I was almost in a meditative state because I hadn't quite woken up yet. I was able to just completely get separated from this judging, strategic, analytical mind and drop into almost what felt like I was taking dictation when I was writing.
Mhm.
And
That's the beauty of writing, isn't it? What comes through that surprises us.
And it's interesting how much that relates to 2 hour speaking too.
Mhm.
And I'm not suggesting that you get up and you book all your speeches for 3 a.m.
But what I'll say, Susie, is in indigenous teachings, from 2 to 3 is when the ancestors speak to you. So the
Okay.
fact that you listened and you got up and you wrote and it felt like it was coming through you, it was a language that maybe you didn't understand at the time, but it allowed you to find words for what you wanted to say. So I think that's a source of, in transformational listening, that would be a very valuable source to understand that the ancestors do speak to us and have work they would love for us to do in the world.
Well, that's very powerful and very interesting. And that's exactly what it felt like. I felt like
Mhm.
I had a powerful sort of circle of support during those very early hours that were urging me forward.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit. So if someone is sitting there thinking about getting some more information on your transformational speaking experiences, is the best way to go to realspeaking.com
Uh-huh.
and start there?
Yeah, and I have an online academy as well. It's an 8-month experience with a small community where we meet monthly, and I with Q&A and coaching. And what's been fun lately is someone's getting ready to, working with the home zone, come with a home zone story. And then everyone can really feel what the home zone is like as I coach that person. So it's not quite the same or compressed as the 4-day immersion, but it's the same process over more time and really helps people get really clear about the message they're here to speak. Because if we don't know that, we'll never have a powerful talk. What's mine to say? What's my medicine? What's my message? Then we're ready. And if I can tell you in 1 minute what matters the most, then I can develop a talk that really brings that home for people, that's powerful and connected through story.
Well, I can tell you this morning, as I was making my bed, I started thinking about our conversation today, and I all of a sudden thought about my original medicine, which I haven't consciously thought about for quite a while, which is deeply rooted lightning.
Mm.
And I started thinking about it and I was like, gosh, that is more true 6 years later than the moment I came up with it in Santa Fe, because it really expresses how I love to be both of this grounded world and then this energetic explosion into the world, and be both in a unified way that conveys to people what it is that I want to have happen in terms of impact in the world through my creativity, through my work with
Mhm.
coaching. So I do encourage people, if you want to have a sort of appetizer of the fabulous Gail Larsen, you still offer your original medicine as part of the online
It's
um,
a separate online
separate.
module.
Mhm.
It's actually part of the full 8 module course, but people can sign up for that and get a taste of how the online academy works. And that's for 60 days. So there's 2 community coaching calls. Because what happens with original medicine, Susie, is people think it's what we do instead of who we are. And that's the hard thing in our culture. Who we are doesn't seem to matter. It's like, what do I do? But if we look at who we are when we show up at our best, it's not making something up. This is who I want to be. This is the truth of who I am. And sometimes I step out of it. Then that's what sustains us, helps us to know what to say yes to, what to say no to. Because if I'm not able to express my medicine unscripted, why am I even here? Why am I using my life in this way? And I would say one of the things of aging for me is, how do I use my life?
Mhm.
Where do I put my energy that's nourishing and joyful for me, so that I can be bringing my gifts in a way that matters and feels good to me too. The pushing, Angela Arian, my teacher, always used to say, don't push, don't hold back. And so it's like when you get kicked out of bed at 3 in the morning, don't hold back, let it come. Don't push it. I've got to get this written.
Yes.
Just allow, allow.
And that really, I think, is the best advice, regardless of what is in front of us, what it is that we are trying to connect with. If we can find the courage to surrender and to allow and to tolerate the uncertainty for the first 60 seconds, then we fall into this beautiful rhythm of receiving and then transmitting. And it's a beautiful volley back and forth. And
Mhm.
you access some of the most joyful parts of your creative energy that is so thrilled to now be no longer dammed up,
Mhm.
but coming out and being expressed in the world.
I don't know if it was your experience with writing, but for me, the hardest part was how to structure the book, because I didn't want speaking techniques. I mean, that's just been done too many times, and we think that's what speaking is. But when I got it was the heart of speaking, the art of speaking, and the energetics of speaking, and I had a structure, then I could open to the mystery and how to open to that creative capacity to let it come through. And that's the same as, we have that storyboard structure for a talk, but then we're free because our ego says, okay, I know what I'm doing. And then we can release ourselves to something even better.
Now that would be how I would typically approach things. Why I did it a completely different way, I will never know. But my approach was actually sort of like going to a farmer's market or to one of the beautiful Parisian markets with my straw bag. And I was walking around looking at what was the most colorful, what was the most fresh, what looked the tastiest, what maybe has the greatest story, what part of the country did this fabulous cheese come from. And I just went around in the world of innovation and creativity and selected these ingredients that looked intriguing and fabulous. And I put them all in a bag. And then I got back to my desk and dumped everything out and tried to figure out what to make out of it. It's almost the way that I was taught when I was in Provence in May, which was a courageous cooking experience, which is cooking without recipes. You just gather all these great things and then you try to make something fabulous out of it. And invariably you make something that you didn't even know it could be a meal. And in my case, that was a lot of how the first draft of the book was created. Now, granted, it needed a lot of editing and help after that because it was sort of like a gloppy mass of clay on a potter's wheel. But it had all of this interesting insights and energy and passion and devotion to what brings me alive that if I had started in my typical mode, I don't know if I would have gotten to that place. So it's kind of interesting how it works. But I think that there's definitely the sticky, and I did the method of the sticky notes after I got my first draft done. Now, when I think about my next book, I don't think I will do it the same way, but we'll see.
And what is the next book?
Well, I'm not ready to disclose that yet, but it will be completely different, and it will reflect a lot of what the heart of Buoyant is in a very different way. So,
And I think a lot of it will probably arise from the response to Buoyant and the young audience you're finding that's excited about your work. And that's the beauty of putting something out that's so true to who we are. Then people can line up like a barcode that are the people we're meant to serve. And it helps shape. I mean, we're all teachers and students at the same time in terms of the exchange when we put our energy out, whether it's speaking, teaching, writing. It's beautiful to see the unexpected things that arise from that.
That has been the greatest gift, to know that you rolled up a little note and put it into a bottle and put a cork on it and put it into the sea and wished it well. And you don't know which shore it's going to land upon, who's going to pluck it out of the water, who's going to read it, how they're going to interpret it, and how it's going to hopefully impact them in a positive way. And I had some guesses about who my audience was and what was going to be their reaction to it, but I had no idea about the teenagers. I had no idea about the people in their 80s, people who aren't entrepreneurs, who are just so desiring to connect with a deeper part of themselves that they intuitively knew was there. And somehow they believed the cultural lore that the world of creativity was just not meant for them. They didn't have the talent, or they didn't have whatever the special sauce is. And so people are accessing that intuition and imagination and problem solving ability, and it's changing their way of moving in the world, which thrills me to no end.
Because we need to change the way we move in the world. We need creative solutions on a grand scale right now.
Yes. And
to be free to be part of creating that instead of watching what happens is it's a great time to be alive.
Well, and we see this as, we see what happened last night with Generation Z. There are young people who are so empowered, and they're stepping into what it is that they want to see in the world in new ways. And that is incredibly exciting for me to see that, and know that the younger generations are recognizing that they have a beautiful opportunity to shape what is from a place of passion and from a place of powerful problem solving.
Yeah.
So, well, Gail, I really appreciate your being here. I want to put up on the screen how you can get in touch with us both. You can find Gail at realspeaking.com. You can find me at innovationandcreativityinstitute.com. And I also would like to encourage you to check out the Transformational Speaking book, which is on Amazon, as well as Buoyant. You can order it from there. I'm also offering a little holiday bonus. So for folks who purchase 3 or more copies of Buoyant through Amazon, you can send me your receipt to Susie at innovationcompass.com, and I will gift you or someone who you love a free 1-hour coaching session. So I'll put that up on the
That's
screen.
pretty amazing.
And it's a wonderful way to give the book to either someone who you think would resonate with the message, whether they are an entrepreneur, an aspiring entrepreneur, someone who is desiring to reconnect with themselves in a new way, or perhaps like the young teenagers who are reaching out to me who are saying, this is making me feel like I have a real part in the world in a way that I never knew that I had. So I want to
I think I'll do that, Susie, because I would love an hour with you as I shape this next thing. And I don't have a special offer, but I'll tell you a secret.
Great.
If anyone who signs up at realspeaking.com for my free report, 6 Radical Truths to Transform Your Speaking, will then get a code to do the original medicine module for $97.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say that again, because the original medicine training in and of itself will put you into an entirely new frame of mind and certainly a very powerful connection to yourself. You will feel as if you have come home to yourself when you have this training and you learn what and bring forth what is your own original medicine. I know that was the experience for me. So do go to realspeaking.com and sign up. And Gail will send you a code for that. And that will be one of the most fun holiday presents that you can possibly imagine. It's a great time. You can do this over holiday break and go into the new year knowing some very powerful self-knowledge.
And you have to get out of your head to do it.
Yes.
Unscripted for sure.
And you may want to have a buddy go through that training with you. So maybe
that really helps.
Encourage a friend to sign up with you and you can have an accountability buddy. Well, thank you so much, Gail. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for all the work that you put into the world. And more importantly, the love and the energy that you give. It's unbelievable.
Well, I am living from my medicine, and I love the people I get to serve, and I'm glad it shows.
It totally does. All righty, my friend. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for being with us today. And reach out to me if you have any questions at Susie at innovationcompass.com. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Journey well.